and welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number, you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I made the mistake. My apologies. My apologies. I made the mistake of staring at the internet before getting on, and there's somebody wrong on the internet right now, but I will resist the urge to correct them at this moment. Right now, we got to talk about, believe it or not, we got to talk about football, and I gotta be real honest with you. I love college football. I love to watch college football. I like to go to college football games. I like to tailgate at college football games. You know, so I've got my Rectech grill. It's a smoker. I've got a big professional grill that I do all my grilling on, and I smoke on the Rectech. They just changed their name, RECTEC, to RECTEQ, because they want to get into other lifestyle products, coolers and stuff, and they ran into trademark issues, but it's great. And I watch it, and I'm just, you know, I had on Matt Moore, the cookbook author, a while back, and the elaborate setups that people do tailgating around the country. If I wrote a book again, and I feel like I got another book in me, however painful they are, it would have to be on the great tailgating traditions of the SEC. I mean, good gracious, you go to, whether it's the University of Alabama or the University of Mississippi, no one wants to go there though, but you go to Oxford, you go to Baton Rouge, you go to Athens, and my goodness, I mean, even Vanderbilt is capable of awesome tailgates. The good eats, the bar service, everything, and it is a community. There's a community aspect to it. And now if you didn't hear the news yesterday, although this is really probably the biggest virus-related news out there, is the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are thinking they may scuttle their football seasons. Now, this was leaked yesterday by Dan Patrick, and it is Dan Patrick on his morning radio show said that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were working together. They were going to cancel their football seasons. The vote was 12-2. Nebraska and I think Michigan were the two that wanted to continue playing. No one else wanted to continue playing. Jim Harbaugh of Michigan is really upset about it, and they're pushing very hard to change this. Pete Ricketts, the governor of Nebraska, is openly calling for them to reject the idea. Ben Sass, the senator from Nebraska, is also calling on them to walk this back, to not do this. The SEC met yesterday in an unplanned meeting. The SEC commissioner and presidents of SEC schools met yesterday, and they've decided to take a go slow, wait and see how it plays out approach. Harbaugh, to his credit, in Michigan, has pointed out that the players on the football teams are actually more safer than the other kids on campus, given the protocols they put in place at the University of Michigan and other schools. Now, I realize here in the South, where most of you who listen to this program are paying attention, we pay attention to the SEC, maybe for basketball, the ACC. Unless you're a Tech fan and you have visions of Georgia Tech beating Georgia. Otherwise, nobody cares about anything other than the SEC. And let's be honest, if you live in the, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or some hippie sound Washington state, you too only care about SEC. You may be brainwashed into thinking you actually care about, the University of Minnesota football team, but you really don't. I mean, football in North America, football is the NFL and the SEC. That's really it. There are other conferences in the nation, and due to the cheerleaders, you do have to take the University of Texas seriously as a football team. You do have to take University of Texas seriously. I do like to go to University of Texas football. They're fun. They actually are. But I mean, beyond that, does anyone really care about like Boise State? No, you really don't. Now, I feel compelled to give you, because you probably don't know, because, again, people care about the NFL and the SEC. Let me give you the list of teams that are in these other conferences. So in the Big Ten, you've got Indiana, University of Maryland, University of Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers, University of Illinois, University of Iowa, University of Minnesota, University of Nebraska, Northwestern, Purdue, and University of Wisconsin. That is the Big Ten. Now, let me give you the Pac-12. The Pac-12, nobody cares about the Pac-12 if we're really honest. University of Arizona, Arizona State, University of California, Berkeley, UCLA, University of Colorado, Boulder, University of Oregon, Oregon State, University of Southern California, Stanford, University of Utah, University of Washington, Washington State University. How many people even knew the University of Utah was in the Pac-12? I have no idea. I make light of it. I mean, obviously, the University of Southern California is a good team. UCLA is a good team. And of course, the Ducks, the University of Oregon, are a fairly notable football team. But by and large, people care about the SEC. There are a few other conferences people care about. I've never quite understood why we allowed in Missouri and the Aggies into the SEC, but I'm okay with it. We should have brought in the Longhorns as well, and maybe now we can. Bring in the Longhorns and Oklahoma and just have a huge SEC rivalry, multiple rivalries. But nonetheless, here's the problem, and here's what we need to consider with football. If football seasons are canceled, it's actually bigger than football seasons. Now, you should know that the president of the University of Tennessee has come out and said they're playing football. The coaches at Michigan and Nebraska have come out and say they're playing football. The University of Nebraska has come out and said they're playing football. Wake Forest president has said they're playing football. Dabo Swinney is coming out today, apparently an unscheduled press conference, and saying Clemson is playing football. And the quarterback from Clemson also is coming out with a press conference with Dabo saying that they're playing football. Whether it is intra-league or inter-league, they're inter-conference, intra-conference, they want to play football. The nation wants them to play football. People need a distraction. I was actually, so our flagship station is WGAU in Athens, and I was on a call with the sales team there. And by the way, for those of you local stations around, I'm happy to do local ads, in markets, for you guys. And I was meeting with the Athens station about that a little while ago. Charlie may get heartburn from that, but nonetheless, we were talking about this and just the nation is tired of the virus story. You will note if you're listening to this program on a regular basis here lately, I've tried to start the show with something other than the virus, except when there's really big news on it, because people are tired of this. People are tired of the virus. They're tired of the bad news. Frankly, they're even tired of politics. They're tired of the president, Joe Biden. They're tired of all these stories. That's not why I'm actually starting the show with football today. I'm starting it because it actually is very big news today. People are very concerned about it. But there are bigger ramifications to football. I guess I should clear up my thought. I was on this call about advertising, and one of the people asked me, how is the audience responding to the show, and what are they thinking about the news stories, and where's the balance? And I said, I can tell because I interact with so many of you. You guys are tired of the virus. You're tired of hearing about the virus. You're tired of the show starting about the virus. I am too. And I generally, because I live in the real world and interact with so many people who listen to the show on a daily basis when I go to the grocery store somewhere here in Macon, I know people are tired of it. If I'm tired of a story, my general sense is everyone else is tired of it. And I am tired of the election, and I am tired of the virus. I'm just tired. I hate talking about it. That's why people want football. People want football to come back. They want a distraction. They don't want the NBA, NFL, political take a knee. Let's discuss racial justice stuff. They just want to watch the game. They don't want the in-your-face preaching on politics. They don't want the culture war. They just want to watch football. And we need football, and kudos to the SEC and apparently the ACC as well for standing up and saying they're going to play. They'll take it slow. If developments change, they'll change with it, but they're not going to preclude an entire season. And the ramifications of this, I don't know that people understand really the ramifications if they don't pay attention to football. There's something called Title VII. And in Title VII, you can't have all men's sports. You have to have women's sports and men's sports generally in equal proportion. And you may not have the same sport, but you can't discriminate against girl sports. And what typically happens is that your primary revenue generators of football and basketball generate so much revenue, they then subsidize these other sports, whether it is the men's rowing team or the women's the women's sporting team, the women's sport shooting, women's golf, men's and women's soccer, softball. The bigger sports, and typically the big three are number one football, number two basketball, number three baseball on the men's side. They then subsidize not just the rest of athletics, but they also, to a significant degree, subsidize universities. If you get rid of college football, it's actually bigger than men's college football. Getting rid of men's college football will have a serious impact on eradicating other sports that do not turn a profit and do not generate revenue for schools, and therefore depend on the revenue generated by the football team to cover their costs. For example, let's take golf. Golf is increasingly an area where women can get scholarships at schools. Shooting, I keep telling, my daughter is actually a very good shot. I'm impressed with my daughter. When she shoots, she is actually very good. She has I'm not ashamed to brag on my kids. They are wonderfully talented, in art. My son wants to be an architect. When he grows up, he gets into Minecraft. He builds these elaborate buildings. I'm impressed, and he does them so quick. My daughter is a brilliant artist. Both of my kids are actually really good shots. And I don't know where they got it from. But they are. The few times we take them to the gun range, we go to Eagle Gun Range here in Macon, and they love to go. We don't go enough. In fact, we haven't been in a while. It's hard to get into. There's been such a crowd. But you go out to Eagle and take them to the gun range, and they are fantastic shots, and they love to do it. And I wish my daughter would join a shooting clay team or a shooting team, because if you're a girl and you're on a shooting team, or you're on a golf team, mind you, even you're a boy on a golf team, you can get a scholarship to college as an athlete in those areas because they need those players, so they offer scholarships to them. And oftentimes those scholarships are funded by the revenue generated from football and baseball. Thank you, Jack. I said Title VII. It's Title IX. Thank you. Title VII is employment. Title IX is. I said this yesterday too. So thank you to listener Jack for correcting me on the fly here. Yes, Title IX. And I had it in the back of my head that it was Title IX, and I kept thinking, no, it's got to be Title VII, because I always say Title IX. It's Title IX. But your college football and basketball and baseball, they subsidize these other sports. So if you get rid of college football in particular, you're penalizing your female sports. So if you're a feminist, for example, you want men's college football to play, because that's how you get your Title IX equality in college sports, is football. You don't like to talk about it. Nobody likes to talk about it, but that's the reality. You turn off college football, you turn off the spigot of revenue generated. And this year is actually a huge potential for non-ticketed viewer revenue, meaning television rights, reservations for spaces because you got to socially distance for tailgating, things like that. Colleges could pack in the revenue for this stuff, socially distance people through college campuses to ensure appropriate space for tailgating, things like that. They could do all of that, and they could generate a huge amount of revenue for other sports within colleges that keep them Title IX compliant. And if they don't have the college football, they're going to have to wind down these other teams, because these other teams aren't going to have the revenue to fund the scholarships for the kids or the revenue needed. So, I mean, take, for example, golf. Some schools have golf courses, and they allow non-students to play on their golf courses with precedent for students. And they also use money from the high-ticket games to then subsidize the golf courses and keep the golf courses in pristine shape. And if they go play elsewhere, they gotta cover the costs of playing elsewhere. They gotta cover the balls and stuff. There's a great golf course here in town. I keep meaning to join, and I have it, the Brickyard. It's not even, it's maybe a mile from my house. My son wants to go play golf there. And I believe Mercer here, I know a lot of the students there go out to that golf course. Well, that costs money, and the schools have to come up with the money, and they come up with the money through the athletic budget, and the biggest driver of the athletic budget tends to be football, or in Mercer's case, basketball. Mercer's got a fantastic basketball team, and they've got a football team now, too, with great facilities. But you get my point here. You get rid of these big college sports, you're going to actually kill off the smaller college sports. And it's going to be easier to bounce back on the big sports than the small sports. These schools need college football in the same way we need college football. We need it as a distraction from what's going on in life. College is needed as a revenue enhancer. The big advocates out there for shutting down sports right now do not live in the real world. And increasingly, this is a frustration that I share with a lot of people who are more skeptical of the virus than me. So much of the advice that we are getting at this point that the media is giving credence to is advice that comes from people not grounded in the real world. They're so mired in academia that they genuinely can't fathom how the real world works, and they're trying to enforce and impose decisions on the real world in ways that the real world can't embrace because it breaks down, for example, entire athletic programs in colleges if they were to go along with it. We need to be in the reality-based community when we're dealing with the virus, and the reality is we need football. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I need to make a point here that I think is getting missed, and I should have done it in the first segment, but I needed to lay all of that out here. A lot of people are talking about football being canceled, myself included. Did an entire monologue on football, whether or not it's going to be canceled or not. My buddy Chip Roy, he's a member of Congress, longtime friend of mine. He was a college athlete. He was on the golf team, I think, at the University of Virginia Tech, one of them. I think University of Virginia, in any event. He was a college athlete. He's a huge college football fan. And he has pointed out insightfully and accurately that while college football is extremely important, what is more important are the number of small businesses out there that are being devastated still by the economic fallout of this virus. And as much as we need and people want college football, we need to be mindful still of the small businesses out there struggling, the mom and pop shops, the barber shops, the restaurants, the other small businesses that are struggling to either stay open or get back on their feet while Congress refuses to do its job. The president is having to pass executive orders that can easily be repealed by the next president, but more so are arguably in some cases unconstitutional that we need to get into. We can't forget about these businesses. The number of closures is alarming. I was talking to someone locally the other day who was telling me that this is the worst he's been doing this for a while, as a developer, as a businessman, helping other businesses stay afloat, and says it is the worst he has seen the environment for business, that there is just no good news. We need to be mindful of these small businesses. And I've got to tell you, one of my deep frustrations is the amount of time my wife and I love to cook, and the amount of time actually that we've spent eating out. And I don't feel guilty about that right now. The more we support local businesses and local restaurants and spend our money with them, I think the better off we are, because the better off they will be. Helping as many local businesses as you can. Don't feel guilty if you're eating out a lot right now, because these businesses need your business. And the more we can use local businesses, local shops, and keep them afloat, not just restaurants, but other small businesses, I think the better off we will be as a society, because we'll be helping keep these businesses afloat that are really struggling right now. So please keep that in mind while we're all focused on football. The bigger picture is these other small businesses that are struggling and need to be helped. If your business needs to be helped, this is a perfect segue for me to be able to tell you about First Liberty Building and Loan in Noonan. First Liberty Building and Loan is the Frost family. They live in Noonan. It doesn't matter, and this is really important. I don't care where you're listening to me. You could be in Alaska or Hawaii or California or Nevada or Idaho or Georgia. And First Liberty Building and Loan can help you get access to capital, access to credit, lines of credit and loans. That's what they do. They don't help individuals. They help businesses. They deal in $10 million loans regularly. They can help you with PPP. They can help you with other businesses, business lending. If you need help, please reach out to them. The Frost family are good Christians. They've been involved in politics. They help fund the conservative movement. They're solid people. And their business is First Liberty Building and Loan, and their website is firstlibertyga.com. I'm not kidding you when I tell you that they want to help you. I know them. They're good people. They have helped me in the past. They want to help you. If your business needs to grow, if your business needs access to capital to survive right now, if you need to navigate the world of PPP, go to firstlibertyga.com. That is firstlibertyga.com. They want to grow with you. They want you to grow. They want to help you. Reach out to them. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. There's a shooting near the White House yesterday. Right outside the White House, the person was shot, believed by a Secret Service agent, taken to the hospital, expected to survive, but the president was pulled out of his briefing. Right after he started his briefing, he was pulled out. And then came back in 2 minutes later and explained what had happened. And, of course, the media, this is one of the disturbing gotcha trends of the media right now. It's oh, look, the president looked weak. He got pulled out. No, actually, I realize people want to politicize everything, but some things be mature and don't waste your time politicizing. That is one of them. The Secret Service got him out of there and then let him come back in. But it was an interesting moment that got everybody a buzz. Now, I want to move from that to something we've got a divide even here in Georgia on this issue. What to do with state bailouts? I want to play you two clips real quick. This is the Lieutenant Governor Stratton of Illinois.
Look, at every single level of government, we see just an incredible financial crisis due to the COVID-19 pandemic, something that none of us expected that we would have to deal with. But here we are. We see record numbers of people have filed for unemployment. We see every level of government really struggling from what they thought their budgets would be and not being able to maintain that. And we need assistance from the federal government. We need assistance to help our business owners. We need assistance to help with the residents of our state. And that's something that we will continue to advocate for. So we know that these executive orders did not do anything to really help the people that need the most help. That's what we have to be focused on. Today, we are offering emergency rental assistance through our Illinois Housing Development Authority here in Illinois because people need help being able to pay their rent for the remainder of this year. We are going to kick off a similar program for mortgage assistance. People are hungry. There are so many issues that have come up. We need leadership from the federal government to step up and make sure that states and local units of government have the kind of support that they need.
Okay, that was the Lieutenant Governor of Illinois. That essentially we've got to have a state bailout. We got to have money. We need the money. This is Illinois, a bankrupt state, bankrupt because of its own policies. They need a bailout. Well, here's Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary.
Is the president willing to provide some aid for states and local governments, given that the administration is asking states to pay for a quarter of the National Guard assistance and now a quarter of the unemployment benefits?
Yeah, the president's always been clear here that, he wants to support state and local governments, but only for COVID-related matters, and he doesn't want to bail out blue states that had structural problems long before this. So that's where his priorities lie.
Not going to bail out the states. You don't want to bail out the states. So I need to explain this issue to you of what's coming. So one of the big issues, it is the one tax cut. Ironically, and there is a level of irony and humor here. The Democrats often accuse the Republicans of wanting to give tax cuts to the rich, and it is now the Democrats who want to give a tax cut to the rich. It's called SALT. You will hear this referred to by policy wonks as SALT. It's an acronym. It stands for state and local taxes. Under the federal tax guidance and federal tax laws of the past, you could deduct from your federal income taxes the amount of money you paid in state and local taxes. Let me explain to you what happens when I go to Los Angeles sometimes. Occasionally I go do TV in Los Angeles and I get paid in California and by a company in California. And when I get my paycheck in Georgia, I've got local taxes in California are taken out of it. State taxes in California are taken out of it, and Georgia taxes are taken out of it, and federal taxes are taken out of it. If you go to New York City, like, for example, when I was filling in for Rush, There were only, or when I was working at Fox even, they had to keep track of how many times I actually went to New York to do work. Because if you go to New York and earn income in excess, I think it's $10,000 within New York City, not only are you subject to New York City income taxes, you're also subject to New York State income taxes, and you're subject, of course, to the federal income taxes. And so you had to be mindful of how much work you actually did in studio in New York. And you had to be careful that you didn't wind up owing taxes in New York and New York City just because you actually went up there and did some work. So, for example, being in Georgia, I can talk about filling in for Rush. Filling in for Rush, you get paid to fill in for Rush Limbaugh. I actually assume people did it for free. I was willing to do it for free. The very first time I did it, I actually did it in Rush's office in New York City at Rockefeller Center. And we had to keep track of how many times I did it, because if I went over the limit in the number of times I filled in going to New York City to be up there with the team there, then suddenly I was going to have to pay state and city taxes in New York. Wound up doing it out of Atlanta at my radio show, my radio station in Atlanta, just to avoid the tax impact, among other things. And this is a problem in the nation. This is a problem with a lot of these Democrat states, whether it's New York or California or Illinois. They tax the mess out of people. They tax people who come in, transient workers. I mean, look at football and basketball players. They try their hardest to avoid going to some of these states to play games because of the amount of taxes they're going to have to pay to these states. Just by going in and providing entertainment in those states, the amount of tax they're going to have to pay to those states is absurd. And the federal government used to allow you to deduct this, and the Republicans said, you know what? We're not going to do this anymore. And the reason we're not going to do this anymore is because more often than not, the rich people who accuse us of wanting to give tax breaks to the rich are the ones who bellyache about this. They're the ones who benefit from this deduction. We can get rid of this deduction. It's not going to be a huge tax increase on the poor and the middle class. It's going to be a tax increase on the rich. And now you've got the Democrats out there screaming, oh, put it back, put it back, put it back, put it back. And the reason they want it put back is because as long as you had the state and local tax deductions in the federal government's budget plan and taxation scheme, no one had to be mindful of the out-of-control taxation in states like Illinois, California, and New York. And now that people are realizing just how much they're paying, because they can't deduct it anymore from their federal income tax. There's no offset. And so now that people realize how much money they're paying, a lot of people are moving out of those states. Surprise! You finally feel the tax burden of your state, and that's what SALT did, the state and local taxes deduction. That's what it did, is it inoculated people from feeling the local tax burden. Now they feel the local tax burden, and they don't like it. And so Democratic governors are seeing particularly rich people pack up and leave, pack up and move, getting out of the state. Florida has benefited tremendously from this. A whole lot of people in New York have vacation homes in Florida, and they have packed up and moved into their vacation homes as their new permanent residence. And people aren't moving back to New York. They don't want to be a part of the taxation scheme of New York City or Illinois. That's why you see Illinois and New York and California, mostly, those are the three big states, bellyaching about this tax deduction. That is why Nancy Pelosi held hostage the stimulus plan. Part of the Democrats' demand in the stimulus plan was a restoration of the SALT deduction. They wanted a tax deduction for rich people. The Democrats did. After years of accusing the Republicans of wanting a tax break for rich people, the Democrats wanted to allow rich people in New York, California, and Illinois to deduct their state income taxes from their federal taxes, because the rich in those states are the ones who shoulder the burden of taxation in those states. The poor and the middle class, typically, because of the progressive income tax system in these states, tend to get passed over in favor of the millionaires and billionaires who live in those states, and they get eaten alive. And most of the millionaires and billionaires who live in those states who get eaten alive by state taxes don't care about it, because they get to deduct all of that stuff on their federal income tax bill, so it lowers their federal burden and it all comes out the wash. Now it doesn't, and they're living and they're moving. And so you've got the Democrats willing to hijack and hold hostage a stimulus plan for Americans and American small businesses in a time of global pandemic and economic crisis, all so that they can give a tax deduction to rich people. The irony of this knows no bounds. That's why there's no stimulus plan in Washington right now, because of the Democratic insistence on restoring the SALT deduction. Now, we should look at it from another angle. These states, New York, Illinois, California, they've been able to be fiscally reckless for a number of years, in large part because of this tax offset through the SALT deduction. You had all the rich people who write the checks and influence politics. They couldn't care less because they get a tax deduction anyway. Now they don't. And now they're starting to gripe and complain and bellyache about the cost of living in these states. And these states have made very strategically bad decisions. They've been in bed with labor unions, and they've been pouring money into labor unions, propping up labor unions and driving up costs of state labor for state employees. They've refused to reform. They've refused to make cuts, and now they're having to, and they don't like it. They have pensions, and they've handled their pensions badly. They haven't moved their state employees over to 401ks. They want to do pensions. The pension plans are going bankrupt. Populations are winding down, and people are fleeing the states, and they're going broke. And they want a federal bailout. And Donald Trump saying, nope, no federal bailout. We are not doing a federal bailout. And they're livid. They're livid that they now have to deal with the consequence of their bad decisions. You know, not every state has done this. I live in Georgia, and Georgia actually has done a very good job managing state costs. In fact, Georgia has been very fiscally responsible, building rainy day funds, saving money, looking at ways to cut, finding innovations. They've done a very good job. They don't have the economic disastrous results of other states. Well, there is a political angle for those of us here in Georgia. The Speaker of the House of Representatives in Georgia, David Ralston, has asked Congress for a state bailout. He's joining a number of House speakers around the country and political leaders of Democrat and Republican states begging for bailouts. They want a federal bailout. Well, Kelly Loeffler and the Speaker do not get along. The Speaker of the House is a Doug Collins friend and tried, if you will recall, to change the election rules in the middle of the game to try to get a primary election for the special election to help Doug Collins. The calculation being that if they could rush a primary, Collins would beat Loeffler. Well, it didn't work out. The governor threatened to veto it, scuttled the plan. The governor did not want to change the rules in the middle. So Georgia has a rule that when a Senate seat comes open in the middle of a term, the governor gets to appoint someone, and then that person must stand at the next general election. That's the way it's always worked in Georgia. There's no runoff. There's no primary, nothing like that. You're all put on the ballot. It's called a jungle ballot. All the candidates line up together. That's the way it's always worked in Georgia. So the governor appoints Kelly Loeffler to the seat after there's a lobbying effort for Doug Collins, who I like, by the way. This is not a criticism of Doug. Doug doesn't get it. Kelly Loeffler does. So the speaker, who is a friend of Doug's, unbeknownst to anybody, including Doug, decides, you know what, I'm going to rewrite the law and force a primary in this. And the governor said, no, I've already done it. We're not going to change the rules in the middle of the game. That would be bad. You can't change the rules in the middle of the game. And made the speaker mad. The speaker made the governor mad. Well, now Kelly Loeffler is in the Senate. And Kelly Loeffler, by the way, there's new polling out from Survey USA, which actually has a very good track record in Georgia, and she's now 10 points ahead of Doug Collins. Surprise. I'm surprised by that as well. Collins and Warnock are tied, and Loeffler's now, this is the second poll in a row that has Loeffler about 10 points ahead, which is interesting. Her WNBA culture war stuff appears to be working. Unfortunately, I'm afraid her lawyer ad against Collins, I don't like the lawyer ad against Collins. I think it's bad form. He was an indigent defense lawyer. He helped poor people who needed a lawyer. He shouldn't be attacked for helping people with their, but in any event, she's ahead in the polls right now, apparently. But so she is saying no bailout for the states. That she is going to block it. She says it's a blue state bailout. She made a passive aggressive comment about the speaker that it's unfortunate that others from better managed states have gotten involved to be a voice for the fiscally reckless states. I assume that is a shot at Speaker Ralston for wanting a state bailout. But she's saying, nope, this is a blue state bailout. They're the ones who have been fiscally reckless, and the taxpayers of Georgia should not have to bail out the taxpayers of Illinois and New York and California, who have long refused to hold their fiscally reckless states accountable for fiscal recklessness. She doesn't want Georgia taxpayers on the hook for Illinois debt. Good for her. Doug Collins, by the way, affirms this. Doug Collins is saying, yeah, no state bailouts. We're not bailing out blue states. But there are a whole lot of people, myself included, who her forcefulness in this and the way she worded her statement sounds very much like she's taking a shot at David Ralston, who you need to recognize. The Speaker of the Georgia House is now on record asking the federal government to bail out blue states. The Speaker of the Georgia House, a fiscally responsible state, wants your Georgia taxpayer dollars to be used to bail out New York and Illinois. He has asked Congress for that. And it is Georgia's Senator, Kelly Loeffler. David Perdue, he hadn't released a statement on it yet, but Loeffler was first out of the gate saying, we're not bailing out blue states. Those voters are going to have to deal with their politicians being fiscally reckless, and Georgia's voters and taxpayers shouldn't have to bail them out. Good for her for taking that position. Bad on the Speaker for wanting a statewide bailout or a state bailout for blue states. It's not going to happen. But that is why, those of you who want to know why you can't get another stimulus check, those of you who want to know why they can't extend PPE, those of you who want to know why they can't come up with a plan, that's why. The Democrats in Congress are refusing another stimulus plan unless they can get a tax deduction to benefit rich Democrats in blue states who want to be able to deduct the burden of their state and local taxes. It's all politics. Yes, you can call in 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I guess it's about time we do some other intro, outro voiceovers. We got to get with JJ. I'm sorry. I'm talking out loud show stuff. All right. We have other stuff we have to deal with. One of which is important. There is a runoff today in Georgia, statewide. Now, if you're in Northeast Georgia, you have the Matt Gertler, Andrew Clyde race. I misspoke yesterday and said the House conservatives are backing Matt Gertler. That's not true. Jody Heiss actually listens. He texted me and said, no, in fact, he's backing Andrew Clyde. Rand Paul was on the show. He and Mike Lee, I think Ted Cruz as well, myself, have been backing Matt Gertler. I have had people who've wanted to come on and drop Oppo and stuff on Andrew Clyde. I don't know the guy. I'm impressed with the guy. I don't dislike the guy. I just don't know anything about the guy other than he's got a fantastic gun store and does have a compelling story on fighting the federal government. I'm supporting Matt Gertler just because he's got a track record in the state legislature of actually standing up to his own side and voting no against his own side, which I think Republicans need more of. We need people who are willing to go to Washington and tell their own side, you know what, this is fiscally reckless. I'm not going to go along with it. And we don't have a lot of that. Gertler has a record in the state of doing that. So because the more local you are in politics, the nastier it is. It'll be easier for him to be a no man to his own party in Washington than it is in Georgia, yet he's done it in Georgia. That's why I'm supporting him. In Habersham County, there's a state Senate runoff. Stacey Hall is who I'm supporting up there. I know Stacey. I don't know the other guy. And I've had a couple of people email me and say that he's a nice guy. I'm going to take their word for it, but I like Stacey. I think he'll be fantastic. I know he'll be a conservative in the state Senate. There's in Northwest Georgia, I believe there's a sheriff's runoff in Floyd County. I don't know all of the runoffs out there. One day I want to have a budget for the show where I can hire someone to just be full-time election researcher, for the show and keep me up to date on this stuff. But in Northwest Georgia, there is a congressional runoff, John Cowan, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Look, I like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I need everybody to hear that. I like Marjorie Taylor Greene. If I was up there, though, I'd vote for John Cowan, and here's why. As much as I think Marjorie would be a street fighter for the GOP in Washington and for conservatives, there is enough stuff that she has said in the past that, frankly, it's going to be a distraction for Republicans statewide. You know how the media works, and frankly, you know that voters buy this stuff. When you start trotting out all the stuff Marjorie Taylor Greene has said and they start shoving microphones in other Republicans' faces, they're going to demand that they denounce it, and it's a distraction the GOP doesn't need when they need to be spending their money to save other seats, and it's going to cost them money. They're not going to lose the seat, but they'll have to spend some money on it. And with John Cowan, all that goes away. And frankly, it is a practical vote on my part. I have stayed out of that race. I haven't wanted to attack anyone. It is notable that every single other candidate who ran in that race, and there were like 1 billion candidates in that race, they all went with John Cowan. And that should tell you something. Marjorie Taylor Greene brings baggage to that race that the GOP is going to be forced by the media to confront. And you can say it's not fair. You can say it's no big deal. And it's not with you, but it is with independent voters. And those independent voters transcend that district. Now, the other race that I really care about this one, y'all, my buddy Jason Anavitarte is running. It's Bill Leahy's seat. That's over Haralson County, stretches into Paulding County. Bill retired. He's the guy who beat Tom Murphy, the late Georgia speaker. And he eventually made his way to the state Senate, and he's retiring. He is a solid conservative guy. And Jason Anavitarte is running against him, and he's running against a guy named Boyd Austin. And Boyd Austin's supporters have been making racist attacks against Jason, whose family is of Puerto Rican descent. And now they're making anti-Christian attacks, claiming that Jason is backed by atheists when he's actually the conservative Christian in the race. It is profound. If a guy like Boyd Austin is willing to lie about someone's faith, he probably shouldn't be trusted in the legislature. And I hope if you know anyone over in the Paulding County, Haralson County area, you'll call them and tell them to vote for Jason Anavitarte today in that runoff. People need to stand up for him against the slies and the racism that have been targeted towards him. Hello, it is Eric Erickson. How are you guys? The phone number, you want to call in and say hi, it's 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I waited until this hour in large part because our flagship station in Athens, Georgia, WGAU, actually doesn't carry the first hour of the show. They've got a brilliant morning radio show host there who's been doing it for a number of years, Tim Bryant, and his show lasts until 10. And when we decided to launch the show, we just decided, we're going to do a 3-hour show. We can make it available to other stations, and we just know that we won't go live in Athens till 10. That was great. Other than the first week, it was kind of weird. The first week of the show, we did an hour and we knew there was no one was listening. The second week, WCHM up in Clarksville was the second station to pick us up. And then we got picked up WRGA in Rome, and we've been spreading around the state. And the reason I bring all of this up is actually tomorrow. I'll spend more time on it tomorrow. But today, I want to note that as of August 12th, 2020, we will have been on the radio for a year. This is the last day of our first year of doing this program, and it has been a deeply rewarding experience. So here's the thing. It's my show. I'm going to do this. So Abby is our program director in Athens, and she loved the idea. Charlie is my producer. He doesn't get enough credit for all the work he does for me. And we have been wanting forever to do our own show, a syndicated show. I started in radio by accident. I think most of you know the story. I didn't intend to be on radio, and I wound up on radio, and I was hired by Cox Media Group and WSB in Atlanta to replace Neil Bortz, who was retiring. Herman Cain was going to replace Neil Bortz, and then Herman ran for president. Well, they needed someone to replace Herman who could then replace Neil, and they hired me. I was a CNN political analyst at the time, moved over to Fox shortly thereafter, and I was going to replace Neil, but then things went the way they went with Herman's race, and he decided to come back to radio, and it made sense to give the former presidential candidate with the nationwide notoriety the Bortz's slot, and I was doing well in the evening, doing the evening news. Well, the ratings are fantastic for the evening, which makes it very difficult to then move me to a morning show when Herman retired. And but I wanted to do more. I've always wanted to do a national radio show, but this year Georgia is a swing state, and it made sense not to launch a nationwide show, but to launch a Georgia specific show and to grow the show in Georgia, and focus on Georgia as a swing state with the elections. And so we did. And just thought, we will work slow. We'll control the whole thing. Everything comes out of my pocket. And I run the website, The Resurgent, and now I do a daily subscriber-based email called, it's on Substack, and the Substack revenue that I control helps cover the cost. I've got some great advertisers now, Dynamic Money, First Liberty of Georgia, and True Precision, and they help me cover the cost. And we're now statewide. This radio program that you're listening to covers almost all of the state. And at the end of this month, we'll be in more of the state. And by the end of this month, we'll be broadcast and accessible in 2 of the 3 priciest zip codes in the state. That is the Reynolds area around Lake Oconee, Sea Island, and then in the evening I'm on in Forsyth County, which is apparently the priciest part of the state now, according to some surveys. But from the North Georgia mountains to the Florida line, from the Chattahoochee to the Atlantic coast, this radio program covers the entire state 9 to noon. There's one station that runs in a delay, and there are 2 stations that said they would pick it up that didn't, and I gotta badger them to pick it up. But it has been a work in progress over time. It is Charlie and me, and then Philip, who helps me on the website, does a lot of the social media stuff for this. If you see clips of the show picked up, it has been a labor of love, though. We have slowly over time picked up stations. We're now on more than a dozen stations in the state. We will be on 15 stations, I think, at the end of this month. And they're all in Georgia. We live stream it at theresurgent.com. So if you're out of state and want to listen, you can listen on one of the radio stations that has a streaming platform, or you can go to theresurgent.com. We put up clips on my Instagram feed, which I've never really used for politics, but Philip convinced me I should for this, and we continue to grow the show. And my goal, I'm very honest with all the program directors and all of you, is at some point when a position opens in the national big leagues of talk radio, I want this show to be able to be positioned to be able to just plop it down right there. One of the things that makes this show unique, and I realize I shouldn't get into the minutia here, and I'm going to, and I don't mean to bore you because there is news I need to talk about, including these runoffs in Georgia. But one of the things that radio does, I don't know if you guys understand how most radio shows work, is let's take your standard national talk radio show. Your standard national talk radio show also has a certain number of minutes of advertising time set aside for it each day. And your local stations are required to play those ads, and they have someone in-house who every week fills out an affidavit and affirms that those ads were played. And if those ads were not played because of breaking news or weather or something else, they must cancel their own ads and play those national ads. Those national ads preempt their local advertising. Now, along came Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey upended this, and I chose to go the Dave Ramsey route, where instead of me forcing local stations to override their ads and play my ads, and to sign an affidavit every week saying they've played my ads, I play my ads. You hear me talk about True Precision or First Liberty or Dynamic Money. You hear Chris Burns' ad. Chris Burns' ad is a great example. It'll be on later this hour from Dynamic Money, and we play it over the satellite for all of the stations, so they don't have to fill out an affidavit saying they ran it. We run it ourselves. And so we can tell Chris Burns and Dynamic Money, we have run your ad. A local station may have a tornado, may have a fire, may have breaking local news that they need to cover, and they shouldn't have to sacrifice their revenue, particularly when margins are thin these days in talk radio. They shouldn't have to sacrifice their local ads to run my ads, so they don't have to do affidavits and they don't have to do make goods. We give them the show for free. And we give them 17 minutes per hour to run any local content they want to run. And they can do with it what they want, and they never have to worry about our ads. We do it all. And that makes it so increasingly local stations, the economics of radio are tough. You're competing with podcasts and you're competing with satellite radio. And we wanted to make it as easy as possible for local stations to pick it up and run it. And that's what we came up with. And it's actually been successful to get roughly 15 stations in a year when you're really a Georgia station. You don't have a marketing team. You don't have an ad sales team. You don't have a syndicator behind you. We've done it all ourselves. It's been really rewarding to do. And tomorrow we will begin our second year of the show. And I feel that very much that I should give a shout out to Jim, who you never hear his voice down the line. But Jim runs the board for me. I connect into my studio in Atlanta from my house in Macon. And if Jim were not there at this show, you could not hear the show. He is the, I'm dispensable. I can get a guest host. Jim is the indispensable man. Charlie and I are both dispensable, and we couldn't do it without Jim and with Abby and the team at WGAU, for letting us get on the air. I'm sure I'll rehash some of this tomorrow. But I got to tell you that I love you guys, and you stations who picked it up. I love you. Now I got to work on advertisers this year. That's my resolution for the second year, is to grow the advertising base for the show. Because literally, I mean, I've done the show for a year and have made zero because I got to cover the satellite. I got to cover salaries. I got to cover the audio and technology. But I did not know I had a passion for radio. I really didn't. When I was in high school, my dad and I took father-son road trip to check out colleges, and my dad loved Paul Harvey. I mean, the only time I ever remember being threatened by my dad, who's an easygoing, laid-back guy, the only time I ever remember being threatened with bodily harm by my father, other than that one time he broke down the bathroom door when I was 5. There's a story there. Was if you talked while Paul Harvey was on the radio. Now, if you're my age or younger, you may not know who Paul Harvey was, but when I was a kid, from noon to 12:15 every day, our house was silent so that my father could listen to Paul Harvey, who delivered a newscast and was the most listened to person in radio. Probably the most listened to person in radio history. If you've ever heard the God Gave Us a Farmer ad that Dodge, I believe, used for Dodge Ram pickup trucks, that's Paul Harvey. He was one of the most respected people in all of radio. He was leaned right of center, you could tell, but he delivered a straightforward, matter-of-fact newscast. And Paul Harvey, you got the sense when he told you to go buy a product, use that product, and it's kind of how I go with advertising. But so my dad and I were on a college road trip, checking out colleges. We were headed to Mercer University, then we were headed up to see Old Dominion and Georgetown in Washington, and then going to Duke on the way home. And we never made it up to Georgetown, but we made it to Duke, and I loved Duke, but they were rude Yankees and decided I'd go to Mercer. So I wound up in Georgia going to Mercer. But we were looking for Paul Harvey, and we stumbled upon this show we had never heard before called Rush Limbaugh, and had no idea who Rush Limbaugh was. This was 1992, 93. He had just come into national syndication, and he was on some rural station near Tuskegee, Alabama. I remember is when we tuned in. I was driving. It's a big deal. I got to drive. And I thought, you know what? That's awesome. That's just, we listened to him every day we were on the road. We would listen to Rush. And I never expected to do talk radio. One of the highlights of my life was becoming a friend of Rush's. And I got to meet him in person, one time at CPAC in Washington. And then we connect and we trade emails and have gotten together every once in a while. I filled in for him. And I never expected to do it. I was going to be a lawyer, and miserably so. I went to law school because Saxby Chambliss, who was the senator from Georgia at the time, I worked on his campaign. He told me it was like the MBA of politics. I get my law degree and then go to Washington, and all the doors would open. So I went to law school because I wanted to go to Washington, and then married a girl who didn't want to move to Washington. So I stayed in Macon, practiced law, fell into radio by accident, and now have this show. And I've done this for a year. I've made no money on it. And I would do it for the rest of my life without making a penny. If my wife would let at some point, I got to actually boost advertisers and earn a living off of this because otherwise my wife's going to question my life. But I love it. I genuinely love doing this. I do 5 hours of radio a day, 3 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. I actually earn my income from the 2 hours in the evening on WSB in Atlanta. But y'all, I love this. I love y'all. I love doing this program. I never would have guessed if you had asked me what I would wind up doing with my life. Talk radio was not it. And here I am. And man, it is so much fun to come sit behind this microphone every day and spend 3 hours with you. And, you know, I don't get a lot of phone calls. And we finally decided to go out and figure out, why are we not getting phone calls? Are people not listening? Turns out everybody's listening. Nobody just wants to call in. You just want to hear me. And I hope I'm not boring you to death with this story, but y'all, I've been blessed. I really have. I get to sit in my office, in my house, for 3 hours in the morning and talk about the stuff that interests me and pray that it interests you and try to keep you informed with the news. And honestly, I got to let me just leave you with this. I didn't intend to spend this much time on this. There's a disturbing trend in conservatism, and I consider myself a conservative, a Christian and a conservative more than I consider myself a Republican. I was an elected Republican at one point in my life. But there's a really disturbing trend among people in politics on the left and on the right, and particularly I think in the right now, where people just want to have their prior convictions affirmed. You want to have your prior beliefs confirmed. The things that you already believe, you just want someone to parrot them back to you on radio. And you don't want to be challenged. You don't want to be told maybe to think about something differently, particularly from someone who is of your political persuasion. You just want everything that you already think to be told back to you by someone else to affirm that you're true and to affirm that it's true. And I've got a real problem with, I know some of these people in radio right now who they're telling you what you want to hear, not what they believe. And ultimately, I think that trips them up. And you will never have to, I give you this promise, I am never going to tell you what I think you want to hear for fear of losing you as a listener, because I don't think that's fair to you, and it's not something I don't want to be a yes man to you. I want to tell you what I think, and if you disagree with me, I have a phone number, and you can call in and we can discuss it. And we should, as conservatives, be willing to sometimes disagree without me having to parrot stuff back to you. I don't want to do that. I do not want to be the guy who makes my entire career being telling you what you want to hear. I'll tell you what I think, and you can call me in, you can call in and challenge me on it, and that's fair game. But in the meantime, I also want to do my best to give you the straight news, because I find one of the worst trends on the right now is we've descended into QAnon conspiracy territory, where everything is a conspiracy, when most things really aren't a conspiracy. Most things people are just stupid. And I want to tell you what I like, and I want to tell you what I think, and I want to tell you what the news of the day is. And I want to be as straight shooter with you as possible on what the news is and my analysis of the news. And then I'll tell you what I think about the news, but at least try to give you the real facts, because increasingly everyone is so interested in telling you a narrative and leaving out key facts so that they can persuade you by lying to you, essentially. I'd never want to do that. And if nothing else, I figure that segments this show away from so many other shows right now where people just want to tell you what you want to hear as opposed to what they actually think. I'll tell you what I think, and you may hate my guts for it, but that's what we're doing here. And man, we've been doing it for a year and we keep growing. So thank you. Speaking of Tim Bryant, really just one of the best in the business, and he is on WGAU in Athens, and he interviewed David Ralston. And well, y'all know my strong feelings on David Ralston, but Tim Bryant asked David Ralston, had him on, and asked him about football, and I want to play this audio for you. Tim just sent it to me. Let's hear what he had to say.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be with you.
And by the way, your status as a Bulldog fan, it buttressed, no doubt, by the fact that you went to law school at the University of Georgia, got your law degree at UGA.
My status as a Bulldog fan is beyond question.
Okay, and a college football fan. And when you hear that tech kid say, we want to play, if people don't want to play, that's their decision. But we as young student athletes want to play. What can we do? And by we, I mean me, I mean you, I mean Governor Kemp, I mean President Trump, and I mean Jerry Moorhead and Greg McGarity. What can be done to make this safe or safer?
Well, I think the steps that the SEC has taken in terms of developing new protocols are wise. I think they emphasize safety. They say if a student athlete wants to play, let them play. If they choose not to play, they have that right, and it would not affect their eligibility. Each school then would dictate or set guidelines about attendance, if any, and social distancing requirements within the stadium. The teams are developing testing procedures and schedules, and I can't imagine what more could be done to make this the safest environment these young people could be in. And so at the end of the day, Tim, I think it's important that we listen to their voices. We listen to the players. You listen to Monty Rice. You listen to Trevor Lawrence. You listen to this player for Georgia Tech. Listen to Justin Fields, for God's sakes. He's wanting to play in a Big Ten school. We listen to these young men have a lifetime tied up. This is their goal of a lifetime is to play college football. And if they're not playing, are they going to be any safer?
And that's the point that Trevor Lawrence and others are making, Speaker Ralston. Now, what are you going to do with us if we're not playing? They are arguing, these players, that we're safer in a football environment than would be out in, quote unquote, the world at large.
And I think that's accurate. You can get this virus in a restaurant, in a bar, at church, at a family get-together. I mean, we've all heard all the stories about how it has been contracted, and there's no one has made the case they will be safer not to be playing football, and so I think we need to move forward. I think the commissioner's office and the SEC presidents need to move forward. I think the ACC is ready to go with them. I think the Big 12's probably ready to go with them.
That's David Ralston. He was speaking to Tim Bryan on our affiliate WGAU in Athens just a little while ago, and he's, the speaker and I on occasion find strange common ground. Football is one of them. Figuring out what went wrong with our election procedures in this past primary election is another one. I agree with him on this. Completely agree with the Speaker of the House of Georgia on this. We await the Joe Biden vice presidential pick. I have a question. If the election really drags on, and by the way, I wanted to talk to an elections expert, and Steve Greenhut is at what group is he? R Street in D.C. And Steve Greenhut, he's an elections expert, and I wanted to talk to him about absentee ballots and the like. At the end of the show, we're going to connect. And you can hear our conversation on ballot integrity and the like. Actually really interested to talk to him about this issue. But I got a question. If the election does carry on for a couple of weeks after the election, and we determine that, in fact, the polling was right and Joe Biden wins, how surprised is Joe Biden going to be to find out he ran for president? How surprised is he going to be when he finds out who his vice presidential pick is today? Vice president for what? What do you mean I'm running for president? Get off my lawn. All right. This reminds me. Hang on a second. I didn't get a chance to play this audio yesterday. I need to play this audio. This is Brian Stelter on CNN and his reliable sources. Oh, evil, awful, conservative talk radio.
Let's go on a trip together to a totally alternative universe. You never hear what's happening there unless you tune into right-wing talk radio. But you need to know what they are saying because the most popular, most powerful talkers in the country have trained their sights on Joe Biden. What you are about to hear them say is mind-boggling. Look, whether you like Biden or not, this stuff is offensive and otherworldly. So let me set the stage for this before I play the clips. Keep in mind that news and talk radio is still really popular, even in the internet age. Guys like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity can influence tens of millions of listeners. And as this HuffPost headline pointed out earlier this year, talk radio stars were shopping dangerous claims about the coronavirus. They were downplaying its severity. But nowadays, if you listen to those shows, you hardly hear about COVID at all. They have shifted to big-time Biden bashing instead. You know what this is? This is negative partisanship in action. So what's negative partisanship? Well, these researchers from Emory University define it as a pretty simple concept. They say in this article for Political Magazine that over the past few decades, American politics has become like a bitter sports rivalry in which the parties hang together mainly out of sheer hatred of the other team, rather than a shared sense of purpose. The researchers showed that partisans, meaning strong supporters of a specific party, have grown to dislike the opposing party, quote, more than they like their own party. So when the president, for example, says that Biden is against God, that's negative partisanship. It is so hateful.
Sorry, I just felt the need to overlay the sound of a baby crying for shelter. Charlie, whose wife just had a baby, is like, what, why is the baby? Y'all, this is, it's negative partisan. Y'all, this is, okay. This is like the bashing of Fox News. It's remarkable to me. I mean, first of all, have you gone on MSNBC or Brian Stelter's on show where a guy accused the president of having killed more people than Hitler, and CNN, now, in fairness to Brian, it wasn't someone from a show, it was someone else at CNN, decided to repackage that clip and push it out on social media where they accused the president of killing more people than Adolf Hitler. On MSNBC, they regularly go into Trump derangement syndrome. And they're going to focus on, here's why they are upset with talk radio. Do you know, the left has never been good at talk radio. They have never been good at talk radio. They have tried. Remember Air America? Allegedly still on now on Sirius XM. Apparently there are some left-wing talk radio shows, and in some parts of the country they got NPR, but it's not really at that level. Why is the left so bad at talk radio? It's very much like this is going to offend some of you. Have you ever noticed how terrible Christian movies are? Listen, I don't mean to be offensive, and in full disclosure, I know some of the donors who have committed to making Christian film and bringing it to the silver screen, and arguably it does well, but it does well in the same way that paid-for-TV movies do well on the Lifetime channel for women who have broken up with their husband. They've gotten a divorce and they hate all men, and so they watch Lifetime movies that just affirm their man-hating views. You've got Christians. I mean, it's just that it's dreadful stuff, y'all. And listen, I really don't mean to be offensive, but I get invited to these movie screenings for Christian movies all the time. I'm like, this just isn't good. Listen, they're so stereotypical. They all have the black woman who knows Jesus, who prays, and there's the montage scene while she's praying of the people feeling the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. There's always the person who hates God and has the dark night of the soul moment where Jesus reveals himself and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit comes on him and he's a changed man. I personally believe if you were to do a movie and you really wanted to make it a faith-based, do a really, really, really good secular movie, but the entire undercurrent is gospel-filled. Like I always thought it would be neat to do a movie about a detective who he's got 12 people in the police department who are working with him, and there's corruption in the office, and they're trying to root out the corruption in the office, and ultimately one of his 12 detectives working for this police chief actually collaborates in assassinating him. Now, you don't see him rise again from the dead, mind you, but the entire thing is gospel filled. The overturning of the order and the cleaning up the corruption and the quest for truth and the betrayal and all of that. Just do movies like that echo the themes of Scripture without being so in your face. I mean, because when you try to do some of these in your face stuff, it's just not that good. A lot of it. I mean, come on. And liberals on talk radio are the same way. It is so humorless and in your face. I've tried to listen to left-wing talk radio. These people don't have a sense of humor. They're angry all the time. And to some degree, there's some people in conservative talk radio who are like that, but even in their anger, these people, they can't find anything funny to laugh at. The only people they're allowed to laugh at are white men. Because, you can't have a joke now. If you're on the left, you can't have a sense of humor, really, because you're going to offend some group by having to say, you're just laughing at the minority group because you're a racist bigot. They got no sense of humor. They can't laugh. Everything is dour and sour and doom and gloom, and the president's a racist, neo-Nazi, and Joe Biden isn't progressive enough for them, and even they recognize he's losing his mind, and there's just nothing to be happy about. They can't stay in business. They're not entertaining. They don't. It's like these Christian movies. They're not entertaining. Sometimes you got to step back and say, hey, your number one job is not to save the world. And in fact, if you're in entertainment, and by the way, if you do Christian movies, just let me give you some free advice here. And I mean this genuinely and sincerely. And I have to remind myself of this sometimes. My job is to entertain you. The job of the person doing the Christian movie is to entertain. The job of the left-wing talk radio show host is to entertain. Not to save the world and not to save souls. Those can be a byproduct of keeping you informed and being somewhat humorous and being very relatable. And in my case, I try to be as very transparent with you. Who I am on radio is who I am off radio. You'd be surprised at the number of people that's not true with. But you're supposed to have fun. And on the left, you can't have fun in talk radio. And so now this gets me back to Brian Sutler on CNN and this lament of talk radio. It's an alternative reality. No, we speak a different language than what people on the left tend to speak. And we have different jokes. We actually have jokes. On the left, they don't even have jokes. They can't have humor because they're afraid of offending some group. And so and if you have no sense of humor, you're not going to find Rush or Sean or Mark Levin or me or anyone at Glenn Beck, Dana Lash, anybody on Conservative. You're not going to find them funny at all because you got no sense of humor. You don't really. It's just all so offensive. How can you listen to this? It's just they're so mean to Joe. Meanwhile, you've got people on TV saying that the president killed more people than Hitler. Listen. The obsession that CNN and MSNBC have for Fox News, it's almost like priapism, and it has lasted for more than 4 years. They probably need to go to the emergency room by now. It's just Fox News is killing it in the ratings. I don't know if you guys have seen, but Fox News, I think last week, was the number one network on TV. I mean, not cable news. It was like the number one network on cable, ahead of ESPN, ahead of the Hallmark Channel, ahead of everything. And they're beside them. How can people watch this? This is so offensive. You don't have a sense of humor. I'm amazed by the number of people on the left who view everything on the right as it is offensive. Because, oh my gosh, they told a joke. They made an Alzheimer's joke about Joe Biden. We can't joke about Alzheimer's. We can't joke about anything. We can't have this sense of humor. I mean, y'all, come on. Sometimes you got to laugh. And Joe Biden is the gift that keeps on giving this front. Joe Biden, for Pete's sake, last week actually asked a reporter if he was on cocaine and was a junkie when the guy asked him if he had taken the memory test that the president had taken. You got to be able to laugh at that, but you're not allowed to laugh at that. You're not allowed to have humor in this stuff. I mean, that is the secret to the success of Fox. It is the secret to the success of conservative talk radio is it's actually humorous. It is actually engaging. It actually engages on topics people talk about. And most importantly, here's the thing. It doesn't take itself too seriously. That's one of the problems that CNN has these days. It's a problem that MSNBC has. It's a problem that left-wing talk radio has. It's a problem that, frankly, Christians making a lot of movies in Hollywood have. They take themselves too seriously. I am a 45-year-old fat white dude. I can't take myself seriously. I can take the topics of the day seriously, but I mean, come on. Seriously? I mean, I love what I do and I have fun and I think it translates over. But I look at some of this stuff and whether it's the movies that go, y'all, again, maybe if people are going to listen to this, they're going to see it. Philip's going to put this on YouTube or Instagram, and I'm not going to get these invitations more. But I get invitations to these movies to come share the gospel through this movie. I don't want to share the gospel through the movie. I want to be entertained by the movie. If the movie shares the gospel while entertaining me, that's fine. But it's like we go to, do you remember the books? When you were a kid, my sister had these books. I might have had one of these books. I think I had a Star Wars one where they were flip books where you could flip the characters, and so you could have like you could have the head of the the girl, and then you could flip through and you could find the top of the clothes, and you could flip through and find the bottom, and you could mix and match, and you could do this. And then there was the guy, and you could do it. Or there was the Star Wars character where you could have the the Stormtrooper helmet, and then the Darth Vader middle, and then the Han Solo bottom or something. You could do. You know what I'm talking about? It's like with the Christians who make the movies, they do this. They've got a little flip book, and this time we're going to have the white chef who has the cast iron skillet and fries the chicken and prays, and we're going to have the black family has the problem with the crisis of faith. But it's all very like templated out, and it's how does anybody get anything out of this? It's the same with talk. It's the same with CNN. It's the same with MSNBC. You listen to Rush Limbaugh, you know the general news of the day that he's going to talk about, but you never know what he's going to say, really. You listen to this program. I didn't even expect it. This isn't even on my list of things to talk about. It just kind of popped into my head. That's part of the problem with the show, by the way. Stuff pops into my head. You people send me messages on Instagram, and suddenly off I go to the races on a topic I never intended to talk about. But it keeps you guessing. It keeps you entertained. It keeps you informed, and it gives people like Brian Sutler something to complain about. That it's an alternative world. You know, it's not actually an alternative world. It's just different from what you're used to hearing or want to hear. And maybe you should branch out a little more and be exposed to a little more of it. There's nothing wrong with Rush Limbaugh's show. He's a fantastic he's the best in the business. You could actually learn how to be entertaining just by listening to even if you don't agree with him. If you just listen to Rush Limbaugh, you will be a more successful TV or radio show personality because he's the best in the business. Be your own person, but understand what he's doing, as opposed to just claiming that it's some alternative nasty reality where they're just out attacking Joe Biden. Have you not heard your own TV networks? Be a little more humorous. Be a little less serious. And you know what? Branch out a little. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of this wide-ranging, we've just totally gone off anything I wanted to talk about today. I will get, because there are runoffs. Remember, there are runoffs. You need to go vote. We may even, I may get to some theology here, so you're fairly warned. The phone number, if you want to call in, though, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I would like to go to the phones to Warner Robins, Georgia, home to the greatest pizza restaurant in the entire state of Georgia, in my opinion, my father's place, down on Moody Road in Warner Robins. We go there. Gosh, we finally went back after months of not being able to go because of the pandemic. We finally went the other day. But I digress. Let's go to Scott in Warner Robins. Welcome, Scott.
Good morning.
Morning. What's going on?
Thanks for taking the call. Just a comment. If you don't watch Fox or or cable TV, all I hear is Trump should have got involved. Trump didn't get involved. He should have got involved, but then he didn't get involved in this coronavirus. I consider the coronavirus probably 40, 50,000 deaths is because of the impeachment virus. The impeachment pandemic. 535 Congress people, they were all concerned with the impeachment, and they knew that there would be no impeachment of Donald Trump, but that's all they concentrated on. As this coronavirus was starting to come out of China, but none of them acted. None, which caused a delay, which caused maybe an additional 30 or 40,000 people died. So I call it the impeachment pandemic.
Scott, I got to tell you, I made this point several months ago, and you would have thought that I had stood on the steps of the Capitol, murdered a child, stripped my clothes, and sang praises to Satan, the way that the left reacted. Actually, no, they would probably celebrate if I did that. No, but you get my point there. They went absolutely nuts on this point. And you're right. That remember when Donald Trump at the end of January, as they were headed into the Senate impeachment trial, he banned travel to China. And the first response of the Democrats was not that it was racist, but that the president was trying to distract from impeachment, that this was no big deal and he was overplaying the virus and he was trying to distract from it. And then they accused him of being racist and hating the Chinese and trying to stir up international turmoil to distract from impeachment over it. You're absolutely right on this, and it doesn't get enough attention. And I got to tell you, I think given the reaction from Democrats to me when I pointed this out, that it is on the money. For those of you still trying to process this, let me explain this. The virus was going on in January and February and spreading in this country. And what was everyone in Washington focused on? Trying to impeach the president of the United States when it was a foregone conclusion there wouldn't be the votes. And yet the Democrats continued. They never even tried to build a bipartisan case to impeach the president. They just tried to do it for show. They tried to do it for fundraising. They knew it wasn't going to work. Again, you have 22 outgoing Republicans in the House of Representatives, half of whom hate the president's guts and blame him for their own departure. And the Democrats never even tried to work with them to build a case against the president, which they're not going to be accountable to his voters. They would have gladly done, but the Democrats didn't care. They just wanted a show trial of the president. They wanted to do this for their own base. They felt they had to, and in the process, they distracted him and them from the virus. And when the president took action to stop travel from China, their first attack on him was not that it was racist. It was that he was trying to distract people from impeachment. Yes, the Democrats in their impeachment effort owe some accountability for distracting all of Washington, including the president, from dealing with the virus. The media will never point that out, and when I've pointed that out in the past, people have lost their minds over it, but it continues in my mind to be a very fair point that the Democrats own some of this by this whole impeachment charade that distracted everyone while the situation was building. That's going to drive people insane, but it's the truth. It is a hard truth that people are going to have a hard time accommodating. But frankly, I think it also is a segue for the president on the campaign trail to point out that the Democrats were distracted by this too. They were distracted trying to do this stupid impeachment that everyone knew was never going to. And let's be honest here, everyone knew it was never going to be successful. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, the Eric Erickson Show, all across the state of Georgia and then some. The phone number, if you would like to call in and be a part of our program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You are more than welcome to call me, but don't suck. You got to be a good caller. And what's a good caller? Someone who makes me look good as the host. All right. The Democrats in Georgia, they want to recall Brian Kemp. Have you heard about this? Yes, they want to recall Brian Kemp. Jen Jordan, one of the state senators from the Buckhead area, said she's been researching it, and turns out there's already a group, and she's been pushing people towards that group. Now, why on earth? Well, they want to politicize the pandemic. They're not happy with Brian Kemp's handling it. They want mandatory masks imposed on everyone. Here's an interesting thing. There is a lot of polling out there that actually shows that the voters in the state of Georgia really are okay with Kemp's handling of this. There's I got to go on a larger tirade here. You will notice, those of you who tell me these things, you will notice I have avoided the virus all day. We've touched on it tangentially with football. Now I must go there for just a moment to make a point. If you are a regular listener, a regular viewer on Facebook or Instagram, what have you, you know I take the issue of masks very seriously. And you know I encourage you to wear masks. And you know I spend a great deal of time rebutting the ridiculous pseudo-scientific articles out there that people peddle to tell you that the virus is no big deal. It's actually just the flu and masks don't really work and all that. You should wear a mask. But in saying that, I also think that some of the ridiculous nanny statism on the left has gone too far. The demands that the government impose on you to stay in your house or not go to church or not wear a mask and all of that, I think have gone too far. The number of people on the left who want to shame you on social media for not wearing a mask. You know, the study, the science actually says if about 80% of people are in a mask, who cares about the other 20%? It's still going to work. You don't need 100% compliance. You need most people doing it, and I don't have a problem with private businesses telling you to enter, you got to wear a mask. In fact, I went to Barnes & Noble last night, and there's a sign on the door. If you don't wear a mask, you can't come in. I'm totally fine with private business doing that. But I understand philosophically why Brian Kemp doesn't want to mandate it in the state. At some point, it's on you and individual responsibility. And bear with me here. I got to make this point, because this is really, really, really important. You should not be compelled, under the pain of going to jail, to put on a mask. I think you should, but I don't think the government should be forcing you. I think you should do it because it's the right thing to do. And here's the thing, in Georgia, there are multiple cities that have imposed mask mandates, including the city of Savannah. I believe the city of Athens, don't hold me to that one, but I think them, the city of Atlanta, and others. They have not enforced it. They have not enforced it. They have not attempted to enforce it, though they're demanding the mandate. They haven't enforced it. Y'all, if they're not going to enforce it, why make Brian Kemp be the nanny state dictator of the state of Georgia? There are things that you should do that government should not have to compel you to do. Like, for example, if I'm really honest, I don't think there should be seatbelt laws. I think you should wear your seatbelt. I think it's for your own good. It's for the good and safety of others. It is for the safety of those who may be in a collision with you, so that you, by virtue of being an idiot, don't drive up their costs if there's a wreck. But you should do it because it's the right thing to do. But I don't necessarily think the government should be enforcing seatbelt laws. I think the police have bigger fish to fry than that. In the same way, I don't think that there should ever be a law to compel you to put your shopping cart back in the little shopping cart holder. This is just this is nanny statism, and it is a sign of a people who are ungovernable when people themselves won't do the right thing. Because if you're not going to do the right thing without government compelling you to do it, then you're probably not going to do the right thing when government isn't watching. And Brian Kemp seems to understand that, and the Democrats don't. And here in Georgia, now the Democrats want to engage in a recall effort of Brian Kemp for not imposing a mandate on masks. And I want to be very freaking clear with you people. When Brian Kemp reopened the state, there was a bunch of histrionics and hysterical writing, including in The Atlantic, which said that this was an experiment in human sacrifice and everyone was going to die because of what Brian Kemp did. And do you know what? In fact, I'm going to pull up the chart right now, and I'm going to put it on Facebook, where everybody who's out there who's watching on Facebook will be able to see this. And we're going to see this. We're going to see this graph. And we're going to look at not the data report. We're going to look at the date of onset, which is important. So the governor banned large gatherings on March 23rd. He imposed shelter in place when? On April 1st, April 2nd. He released it on March 1st. And you know what happened? Cases went down. When did cases begin to seriously uptick in the state? Not until June. We went a month in the state of Georgia with decline after Governor Kemp opened. And remember, all of the hysterics told us that we were all going to die because Brian Kemp was opening the state. And the cases actually stayed flat or went down. It was not until Memorial Day and then Black Lives Matter protests and then pride marches in the street, despite cities telling them not to do it, that you saw cases skyrocket. It was not conservatives spreading the virus. It was progressive activists in the streets marching who spread the virus, and now they want to use their spread of the virus to try to impeach or recall Brian Kemp from office because they're the ones who behaved irresponsibly, and somehow it's Brian Kemp's fault that they were marching and rioting in the street and smashing windows and burning businesses, and it's his fault. It was the mayor of Atlanta who let him do it. It was the district attorney in Atlanta who rounded up the police who would have stopped him. Why don't you recall them instead of Brian Kemp? Because they're Democrats, and they would much prefer to blame Brian Kemp than blame Democrats. They would much prefer to say it's a Brian Kemp fault and a Brian Kemp problem than to recognize that it was individuals who didn't. The man has gone around the state of Georgia on multiple occasions with the Surgeon General of the United States and did a massive campaign to tell people to put on a mask. He has put on a mask when he's in public. He's told people to put on a mask. He's gone to every part of the state to tell people to put on masks. But he hasn't mandated it in law. And that's your problem. You know, you could have joined him on this. You could have made it a bipartisan effort. You could have had Stacey Abrams march around the state with the governor and tell people, you know what, you should put on masks. We disagree on whether it should be mandated, but we both agree you should wear them. But no, they didn't want to do bipartisan. No, they didn't want to do nonpartisan. They didn't want to make it nonpartisan. They wanted to make it a partisan issue. They wanted to divide people. And now they want to recall the governor because they didn't get their way. They want to politicize the pandemic. They want to turn it into politics. They want to recall the governor of the state of Georgia because he had the audacity to tell people they should do the right thing without the force of government coming down upon them. And they want the force of government coming down upon them. They want bigger government. They want more government power. And they are horrified that the governor won't mandate a mask. They are horrified that the governor won't mandate statewide masks in schools. He wants schools to be able to determine for themselves what they should do. Horror. You know, what's so bizarre here, if everyone will recall, in the beginning, the governor's position was that every region of the state is different, and therefore, because every region of the state is different, every region of the state should be able to have a different plan for the virus. And these Democrats bellyached and said, no, we need a statewide plan. We need a statewide plan. Everything's got to come through the governor. So guess what? He did it. And now suddenly they're, oh, no, I think you should allow individual governments to do this. No, you're the ones who wanted it to all run through the governor's office. You got what you asked for. And now as a result, you want to recall the governor because you're not getting your way. You people, not the governor, you people on the left who want to recall the governor, y'all are politicizing a global pandemic. It's not the governor doing it. He's listening to actually the experts who are telling him what to do. And guess what? He said on this here program, if they told him that a mask mandate was necessary, he would impose it. But they have told him thus far there's no reason to impose a mask mandate when, get this, pay attention to this, big news here, those local governments who want the mask mandate aren't even enforcing the stuff they're already supposed to enforce, including social distancing. They're not doing that. So why should he add other mandates that they wouldn't enforce either? This is all a show. This is all politics in a pandemic. It's the best the Democrats have, and it's why probably they're not actually going to be very successful in Georgia. I've gotten some questions about the District 10 State House runoff in Georgia. Victor Anderson, Robert Crumley. I don't really know either guy, but everyone that I know and trust says Robert Crumley, and that Crumley is the one to support. In the other one, that's up in the Habersham County area as well. Stacey Hall, I know up there is on the ballot for State House District 50, I believe it is. So Crumley and Hall, Matt Gertler up in the northeast part of the state. All those runoffs are today. Speaking of runoffs, let's go to Jim calling in Decatur. Jim, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've got 3 races on the nonpartisan ballot here in DeKalb County, and I've tried to read up as best I can on each person, and my computer just went blank there. Superior Court Judge of Stone Mountain, do you know anything about Yolanda C. Parker Smith or Mindy Pillow?
No, I don't.
Those are impossible because they're always suspiciously non-argumentative. Lawyers are paid
because
to argue.
they're running for judge, they got to be really careful with the judicial races there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Board of Education District 3 has Willie Mosley Jr. and Deirdre Pierce. The only thing I found about the two is one difference is Willie Mosley likes parental participation, first and foremost, which I like. Deirdre Pierce likes standard-based education, which I also like, just in general.
Okay,
but that's about the one difference.
Listen, I'm gonna grasp a little bit here, but I seem to recall one of the parents' education rights groups actually supporting Mosley because he's a big fan of school choice and parental involvement. Don't hold me to that, but it seems like there was a parental education rights group that I like that between them actually weighed in on Mosley.
Well, I was leaning slightly toward Mosley because of parents. Can't have anything if you don't have that. And I say that as a former tutor and teacher. Sheriff, Melody Maddox versus Ruth Stringer. No idea.
Honestly, I would go with Maddox, the incumbent. She's not great, but she's actually not a bad sheriff over there.
Whew, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Slight improvement when you say over Jeffrey Mann. Yuck.
Yeah.
The guy who exposed himself. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks a million.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help there. Yeah. Listen, again, one day when I have a budget for the show, I'm going to have somebody on staff to keep up with all this stuff for me. I got to rely on other people for some of it, but a couple of those I knew. The judge ones, they're always a little bit nebulous. Now let's go to Eddie in Athens. You're going to be next. Welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, I was reading your article in Resurgent about A Hill to Die On, talking about God creating male and female, and that not giving ground to that. But also in that, you had the word Aleph Tav, which is et. But that's also, if you go to the book of Revelations, I found this out was interesting. It says he's the Alpha and Omega. Well, the Aleph Tav is the beginning of the Hebrew and the end of the Hebrew alphabet.
Yes, and there's and you got to remember that John wrote in Greek. He didn't write in Hebrew.
That's right.
And there's some relation there. But now, for those of you who don't know what Eddie's getting at, I actually find this is the theology, Eddie, that I was headed towards and wasn't sure I was going to get to, particularly with the guest coming up. But because you called in on this, I'll explain this. In English, you don't get the poetry of Genesis. There's actually a lot of poetry in the style of writing. So if you actually were to read Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10 words in English. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If you actually read it in Hebrew, it's 7 words. The opening sentence of of Genesis is 7 words. And those 7 words, I don't believe it's a coincidence that the entire opening chapter of Genesis leads into the 7 days of creation and the Sabbath rest. And the very first sentence is 7 words. And what's so interesting is that middle word that Eddie was talking about. And there's no English equivalent to that word, so it doesn't get translated. And essentially that middle word, you can say it's et, E-T. And it directs the object of the verb. So the verb is creates, and the actual verb choice is bara. And that word bara is a verb for create that only applies to God. Whenever you see that word in the Bible, it never applies to mankind creating stuff. It only applies to divine creation. And so that word et, that is the center word in those 7 words, that 7 word open, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. That is 7 words in Hebrews, and that center word is et, and et means nothing in English but directs your attention to the object of the verb. That is, what did God create? Well, this central word et is emphasizing that God created everything. Everything. And he did so, that word bara, that verb choice that is used in the Hebrew, he did so in a way that we cannot create. When you go to the Tower of Babel story, and it talks about mankind building the tower, it doesn't use the word bara. It uses a different verb for create or build. When it talks about God building or God creating, Hebrew always uses the word bara to distinguish between divine creation and mankind creation. So what those first 7 words mean, they allude to the Sabbath rest in the 7 words of God created the heavens and the earth, alluding through the use of 7 words to the Sabbath, uses et as the center word of the seven words. The central word is et, emphasizing that the focus of this is on God's creation, the heavens and the earth. He created all things, and it's written in such a way to show that God created in a way we cannot. And what did he create? He created male and female. He made mankind and created them male and female. Now, the purpose of this piece this morning was to show that as we engage, sadly, in a culture war in this country that is deeply divisive, one of the central tenets that is growing and becoming increasingly hostile to people of faith is the transgender movement, where people believe, contrary to science and theology, that we can create ourselves male and female ourselves. Well, actually, Scripture says only God can create us male and female. And that was the point of this morning, is you've got to be able to stand up for this if you're a person of faith, even if you don't want to, because the entire world around you screams and cries and bellyaches and moans and condemns you for being a hater. You know, the things of the world are going to hate the things of God anyway. You can't give up those things to be liked by the world because you're compromising the integrity of your faith belief. So that was my opening that Eddie was calling it. And to get there, I had to delve into the Hebrew to explain it to people this morning. One of my laments these days in the conservative movement and in the sphere of center-right organizations is how many organizations to get a seat at the table with the Trump administration have either compromised their beliefs or gone silent when it comes to free markets and limited government. One of the organizations that's not willing to compromise on the issue of free market solutions for things is called R Street in Washington, D.C. Big fan of the organization because of their unwillingness to compromise on free markets improving things for people around the world. And they really genuinely do. And R Street stands up for free markets. And one of the people who works there is Stephen Greenhut, who is their resident senior fellow, and he's their Western Regional Director. He also knows a thing or two about absentee balloting, and with that so much in the news these days, I wanted to talk to Stephen about this very issue. But all right, man, before I get there with you, though, first, thanks for joining me. And second, really 30 goats, 5 cats, 6 chickens, and 2 dogs live with you in California with you and your wife?
Yeah, we've got a tiny ranch, but we like animals, so we have too many of them.
All right, so I guess with that many goats, you never have to actually cut the grass.
Unfortunately, they're rather spoiled, so they're pretty addicted to alfalfa. So unfortunately, that's not true.
I had to ask. I had to ask. Now that you're not here to talk farming with me, although I was just totally intrigued by that line in your bio. I want to talk to you about absentee balloting because I was a lawyer who specialized in elections law in Georgia for a number of years, and I'm always shocked by the number of people who don't understand the issue about absentee ballots and how they process, but also that elections are within the purview of the state. So you've actually got 50 election codes, not really one size fits all elections. And I just wanted to let you riff on this issue and talk about it, particularly as so many conservatives these days are hesitant to do what they've done in every other election, which is request an absentee ballot.
Yeah, you know more about it than me. I saw that you have dealt significantly in Georgia. And I've been writing about it and looking at these reforms, and it really hasn't been particularly controversial, the whole idea of, absentee balloting or vote by mail. I mean, we can make some distinctions. I saw that you made one distinction on Twitter that's a legit one between whether you request the ballot or whether you're automatically sent it. But our argument has been, look, during this pandemic, we don't want people, apparently don't want people going out and waiting in lines. It seems to make sense to expand absentee voting in one form or another. And I'm a big believer in letting the states deal with things as they want, and the locals. I live in Sacramento County, and we get mailed a ballot automatically. I personally like it. We get the ballot. I get to, especially here in California, we have all the various initiatives, and you read them and you decide and you take it in. So I don't think it should be so controversial. Now, there are problems with all election systems, but the idea of making it easier, at least having no excuse absentee balloting, seems to make a lot of sense during the pandemic. Now, President Trump has turned it into a controversial issue, and one of the points he's made is that no Republican will ever win again, which is nonsense. I mean, I've looked at a couple studies that seem legit. One from Stanford that suggests there's really no partisan impact on vote by mail per se. You do get a somewhat increase in voting numbers, which that's not a bad thing to get in a voting reform. So I think we ought to look at these things. If there are problems, look at specific problems. But I don't think vote by mail is not a problem. It's generally a good idea. And
let me ask you one question on this. It seems like one of my concerns is you live in California, and one of the issues is, like, for example, in Georgia, your ballot has to be at the Board of Elections by Election Day. And if I understand right, in California, it's got to be postmarked by Election Day, which could delay the mail to some degree and so delay the vote counting.
Yeah, I mean, that's an annoyance, right? I don't think it's a fundamental problem. I sure like to get the election results on Election Day. That I don't think is a fundamental problem with it. I do think there's a problem with ballot harvesting, which is a separate measure, which we do in California. Jerry Brown had signed a law, I think it was in 2016, that allows ballot harvesting. I don't like that. I don't like the idea that somebody else can gather your ballots, but absentee voting, requesting, even if you have to request it without an excuse, where I think like 34 states do no excuse absentee balloting, which makes a lot of sense. So I mean, why should I have to have an excuse for why I want to get a ballot to my house?
Well, let me go to ballot harvesting for a minute. If you can just explain, because I talk about it on the show, but it's kind of like when your parents tell you not to do something, people will believe it when your parents' friends tell you not to do it. I talk about it, but let me let you explain what ballot harvesting is.
Yeah, it allows other people aside from your spouse. I mean, I don't think anyone complains if my wife takes my ballot in and drops it at the station, but we'll allow unions or other groups. We could collect your ballots and take it in and drop it off at the official station. And I think that's a problematic thing, but that's a separate issue. One of the things, too, that I think's lost in the debate, some of the critics of it will point to examples of voter fraud. And any kind of voter fraud undermines democracy and the faith in our system. But the level of voter fraud with absentee balloting is less than it is with regular voting. And there's another problem with to cast a vote. That's a problem. People. So there are problems on any system that's run by the government is going to have some problems. But I think you get fewer problems with vote by mail, and it just makes it convenient. It goes back to the Civil War, which was, I guess, the original absentee balloting. And I just don't understand why it's such a controversial idea.
Because everything's got to be controversial these days, it seems. Now, let me ask you, you were king for a day, and you got to rule on this issue. How would you implement an absentee or vote by mail process for the country? What would you say was out of bounds, and what would you say would be in bounds?
Yeah, well, fortunately, as a free market guy, I don't want to be king for the day. I would consult experts such as yourself who've actually dealt with the cases in specific states. But I would allow the locals to decide how they want to do it, the states and the locals, whether they want to, like Oregon automatically sends the ballot. So if some states want to do that, and they've had very few problems, that's fine. But I would outlaw ballot harvesting. And I would, outlaw any sort of online voting where there's no, there's no way to trace the ballot. That's a very dangerous idea.
Right.
But I would allow a really broad vote by mail system. But I also, in exchange for, limiting ballot harvesting, and I say limiting simply because I don't see any problem with having, your spouse take your ballot in, but having outsiders take the ballot. But otherwise, I would have an expansive system that makes it easier to vote. It's also good for, it's good for elderly people. You shouldn't need an excuse. That's the direction I would go.
Okay. So, I'll give you my opinion here on this one. I'm not as skeptical or hostile to mail-in balloting, but I realize this is naive and we'll never get here. But I actually am one of those people who believes that we should actually stop all mail-in and absentee balloting unless you're elderly or infirm, and make everybody show up on Election Day and exercise their right together on Election Day. Make it a national holiday if we must to get everybody there. But I just think there's something about Election Day that mail-in balloting kind of gets us away from that one special day of the year where we go throw the bums out, and instead we spread it out over a month and a half. And then honestly, I have to admit, selfishly, having been a former campaign guy, I also really hate the whole process because it really screws up your timeline for campaigning.
Oh yeah, well it does have its ups and downs in terms of just from a campaigning situation, right? Because you're less vulnerable in a spread out election to one big event, right? That upsets people and changes. So that's not my concern. My concern is making it easier to vote. I personally don't like going into and waiting in line and casting a ballot. I like doing it at home. That's just a personal preference. I try not to let preferences decide. But in my research, it doesn't give an advantage to one party or the other. I am afraid that Republicans, in buying into this whole concern, are it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And all of a sudden we see President Trump telling people to vote by mail in Florida after he's telling them not to vote by mail.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that one, because that actually, that one, I mean, there's a lot of data out there that Republicans do tend to listen to what the president says, and so they're being outmaneuvered by Democrats on mail-in and absentee balloting this year. And normally in the past, Republicans have led in absentee ballots, and this year, even in Georgia here, the Democrats are leading in absentee balloting right now because of the Republicans embracing the president's skepticism of it, and it is almost a self-defeating prophecy for the GOP.
Yeah, I think that's problematic, and I just wish that, as you started out, very nice things you said about my employer, and I appreciate that. But trying to look at every issue, regardless of whatever the partisan spin is on it, right? Just try to say, is this a good idea? And I think it's a good idea, especially during a pandemic. And so that's where we are on this.
I do have to agree that given a pandemic, having a bunch of people standing in line, making it in some of these polling places, like my polling place, it's almost impossible to socially distance inside the polling place. So, well, look, I appreciate you taking time away from the farm to come on and talk about this. I really do. Thank you very much for doing it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Stephen Greenhut from R Street. And again, R Street, they focus on free markets. They're not Republican. They're not Democrat. They're definitely right of center because of their support for free markets. And it was just worth getting Stephen on to talk about this because y'all do need to understand this, that the Republicans are running nationwide now. They normally have an absentee balloting advantage. And they're actually behind pretty significantly in most states right now because a lot of the voters have heard the president's message about early and absentee voting, and they've decided they're going to show up on Election Day. The problem with showing up on Election Day is you don't know on Election Day, is it going to rain? Is there going to be a storm? Is it going to be snowing, depending on where you are in the country? And is the virus going to be running amok? And that may dissuade you later. And so normally the Republican advantage on absentee balloting it's gone. Now, that being said, there's a runoff today in Georgia. If you're in Northeast Georgia, you've got the Gertler-Clyde race. If you're in Northwest Georgia, you've got the Cowan-Green race. My buddy Jason Anavotarte is running in Haralson and Paulding County for the state Senate. And then Stacey Hall up in Habersham County running for the state Senate. And there are a number of other races out there where people are doing their best to be engaged. You got the Crumley race up there as well in Habersham County, Anderson-Crumley race. Y'all go out and vote today if you haven't done absentee balloting. Go vote today. Exercise your constitutional right if you can. I want to spend just a moment here on the Innovatarte race, and I realize that I'm only talking really to a small segment of the listeners, but y'all statewide need to understand what's going on here. So Jason Innovatarte is a friend of mine. His family's of Puerto Rican descent, and he supports RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And so his opponent is named Boyd Austin. I don't know that Boyd Austin actually supports RFRA. And Boyd Austin's supporters have been making very racist attacks against Jason. Some of them have said he doesn't even live here. They've called him ethnic slurs because his family's Puerto Rican. By the way, his dad is a Purple Heart recipient, a veteran of the U.S. military. And overnight, they started sending out text messages, Jason's opponents did, that he's being supported by a bunch of atheists in Atlanta and that God-fearing Christians need to go to the polls and oppose him. What really burns me up about this is that I know Jason. I know that he's a Christian. But not only that, all of the Christian pro-life groups in the state are supporting him. That's right. All of the Christian groups are supporting Jason Innovatarte. And his opponent is calling him a godless, secular atheist who's being backed by atheists in Atlanta and won't stand up for religious liberty, when Jason actually has made that a campaign issue. And it bothers me greatly to see a friend of mine being lied about from a faith perspective, and also someone saying I'm a good Christian and this guy's not. Don't lie about your opponent's faith, because then that makes you question it. It's gotten really, really nasty out there, and I'm sticking with my friends here. So in Habersham, you've got Stacey Hall and Robert Crumley. Matt Girdler, listen, I have not allowed a single person to come on and say anything bad about Andrew Clyde. He seems to be a perfectly good guy. I just know Matt, and I'm supporting Matt, and I know his record. You know my feelings on the Green Cowan race, and then there's Jason Innovatarte down in Paulding. We've got races. If you're in Middle Georgia, where I am, I know there's a Bibb County mayoral race. And man, that one has gotten dirty. I hear there's a big turnout in North Macon for Lester Miller. We'll see how it shakes out. I'm not enthusiastic about my local runoffs here in Middle Georgia, but statewide, there are runoffs. People died to give you your right to vote. You should exercise that right. If you did not do an absentee ballot, you can show up at the polls today, but you're going to have to, I believe, wear a mask, and they'll try to make you socially distance. So please be safe when you go vote and don't spread a virus if you go out there to engage in our democratic right. It is Eric Erickson. It is my show. This is, I guess, my time to shine. I got to work on these transitions coming back in. I've got to say that the President of the United States appears to have taken my advice, tweaking it a little bit. You know, one of the places I said go, if not Yorktown or Old North Bridge, was Gettysburg. And the White House, the President himself is saying that he may very well deliver his speech at Gettysburg. And you will be unsurprised to learn members of the media have rushed out to claim that he's going to a Confederate battlefield to give his speech in solidarity with Confederates because the president is a Confederate sympathizer. Now, I know that it was actually a Union win. I know it was. But the media, Pickett's charge, it's the Confederates just Gettysburg. It's amazing how broken people are because of the president. Apparently, only white supremacists speak at Gettysburg, which I guess Abraham Lincoln was a white supremacist. You know, this is the perfect time. The party of Lincoln, that is the Republican Party. Lincoln is famous for not just being the president during the Civil War, but his Gettysburg Address, a very short speech. And the president himself, honestly, if the president was to give a speech at Gettysburg, I think he should do something very similar, make a very short speech. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those here who gave their lives that this nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from those honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. That was the entirety of the Gettysburg Address. A remarkably concise speech, 272 words. The trap for the president in going to Gettysburg. One, his speech, I guarantee you, they will move away from Confederate symbolism. That they're going to move away from that because that's stupid, and I think some of them realize it's stupid. Where they will go is, well, here's no Gettysburg Address. Lincoln said more in 272 words than his 2,000 words. Man, this guy's an idiot. I mean, you're asking for the comparison to Lincoln if you go to Gettysburg. I think it's a good idea. Don't get me wrong. I think it is a good idea for the president to not do his address in Washington. I personally think he should tie it to the Revolution, not the Civil War. I kind of understand why he would want to go in that direction. And Gettysburg is one of the places I said, go to Gettysburg. But if you do, you're going to be compared to Lincoln. And he may invite the comparison, but you know how it'll play with the media. The question, though, is how does it play with the American people? And I think the president could go to Gettysburg and he could deliver an address and say, we are now at a time where those on the political left would divide us. They would divide us parent from child. They would divide us church from community. They would divide us Republican from Democrat. They would divide us white from black. They would tell us that race matters above all and that our identity, not our Americanness, is what's important. And I stand against all of that, and I stand for uniting the country. There are ways the president could do this. There are good ways the president can do it. And it doesn't matter what the media thinks. What do the American people who watch it think? Because all the television networks are going to air it. Everyone's going to see it. And so he'll be able to bypass the media spin on it, going straight to the American public. There's a way for him to do it, but he should go to Gettysburg, not the White House lawn.